Welcome to Conversations with Corrections, hosted by the Utah Department of Corrections. This occasional podcast features staff, incarcerated individuals, and other stakeholders of the UDC discussing issues that impact corrections, both nationally and within the state of Utah. Here is today's host, Department Spokesman Liam Trouchard.
Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Liam Trouchard, and we're going to stretch our format a little bit today. Our guest is Gary Fisher, who has been involved in behavioral health for more than 30 years and is currently the Emeritus Director at the Cirque Lodge Rehab Center in Utah. He served as Executive Director of the Lodge for most of its existence. We don't want to give away too much of Gary's story because this episode features his talk to incarcerated individuals at the Central Utah Correctional Facility in March 2023. So allow us, if you will, to take you inside CUCF and listen to what Gary had to say about his experiences of once being where the audience is now, how his life changed, and how theirs can as well.
Well, good afternoon, gentlemen. I have to say it's pretty rewarding for me to get the opportunity to come back and do this. And I guess I should, I think the thing that qualifies me most to be here is that my inmate number is 01746-081, and that's a federal number. And those first five numbers actually denote that I went into El Reno, Oklahoma, and my inmate number, and it also, the last three denoted that I was from the state of Utah. And back in the day, I went in 1986. I spent 44 months and 17 days, and back then the rule was you're supposed to go within 500 miles of your home, right? That was the whole federal piece. And so they sent me to Oklahoma, which I'm not the greatest mathematician, but Oklahoma seems like more than 500 miles away from Salt Lake City, Utah. But at any rate, I got that opportunity, so I spent time in the FCIs in El Reno, down in Terminal Island, and finally ended up at a prison camp in Boron, California. And what I would tell you is when I went to prison, I was going to tell you that it was the very worst day of my life, right? And we've all had it. You get that, you get up and that judge sits up here and something very much like where I'm standing today, and I remember him asking me if I had anything to say, and me expressing my remorse, right? That what I had done had got us to this situation, that this was going to happen, and he told me, the time for being sorry was over, and he was going to sentence me to 5 years in a federal penitentiary, and we were going to start that sentence today. And, it felt like I had just had it kicked out of me, right? And, of course, they march you off, and I'm thinking my life is over. That's the truth. And so the fact of the matter is I get a chance to look back on that, and it was the respite. It was the respite that I probably needed to separate myself from the life I had been living. And so, what I'll share with you is that Tyler and I have often talked about this opportunity that I'm getting right here, right now. And that was to get up and to talk to folks, talk to inmates about being successful. And as Tyler explained a little bit ago, I had the opportunity, literally you guys, twice. They don't actually let inmates come back into prison, so this is kind of or convicted felons come back to prison. I have not been fortunate enough to get an expungement. Nobody thought enough of the way I've lived my life to give me a break. But I had a young woman who worked for me. She was a counselor over in Draper, right, at the prison in Draper. And she told me one day, she said, Gary, you should come in and tell your story. And I said, gee, Debbie, I don't think they allow you to do that. And for just this kind of one brief moment, she got me a couple of passes, and I went in and I did guys that would, they'd roll out on parole and they'd be back. In fact, I remember sometimes the guys would come back so quick that, we'd actually hold their shampoo for them, right? Because we knew they were coming back, And it's a funny piece. Tyler talked a little bit about the fact that I got the opportunity to run a treatment center. And that was a ways down the line, but at first, the fact of the matter is what we would tell guys in the treatment center is go hang with the winners, right? Go out and hang with the guys who are being successful, but they don't let us do that as inmates. That's not in fact, actually, that's the voodoo, right? And so the fact of the matter is I never knew that there were really any guys who were successful. And the reason that we don't know that there's guys that are successful because that's not news, right? So, whether it's the other inmates or whether it's the officers themselves, all they see is the folks coming, the same thing in treatment, right? Is that all you'd see were the people coming back who had relapsed. You never saw that there were guys like Gary Fisher out there. You never got to see that, there were guys out there that were like the Tyler Hansons of the world, the guys who, actually going out and running businesses, and being good parents, being good fathers, being good husbands, getting the opportunity to give back. And so the fact of the matter is so our only experience is, and probably their only experience, is they just see the guys come back. And the truth of the matter is what I'm here to tell you is, man, there are success stories all over. In fact, one of the things, if this program really works out, so when this is all over, they're filming me, right? So make sure when we finish, you guys stand up and give me a standing ovation, right? So at least we fooled them in the fact that we really thought that this was really a good gig. But, hopefully what's going to happen is that, you're going to get some guys down here much more famous than me. They might not have an inmate number, but they're going to tell you how to be successful, things that they had done. And so that's kind of, that's what I want to talk about. And first off, I should say that success is different, right? I think how I'm going to define success for all of us is that we get done with this and we stay out of here. I think it'd be success for those guys too, right? I mean, success for some people is we go out and make some money. I think, that was always kind of a driving factor. In fact, probably for me, that was a little bit detrimental. But, the fact of the matter is people go out and success might be is that they're good fathers. Their success might be that they just give back. And so, so one of the things that I thought I would try to do today is to give you a few of the things that I don't think anybody told me. They were just a few things that I stumbled on that kind of helped me be successful in staying out of prison, right? And because so I'm in prison since 1986. It's kind of, drug piece is, it's the rage, right? And so, and people are, it's like the revolving door, and I won't tell you that it's probably not that much different now, but the fact of the matter is people were coming in and going out. And the truth of the matter is how I got to prison is that I had a raging alcohol and drug problem. And I had no ability to stay sober. I started drinking when I was about 15 years of age, and I promise you, I didn't stop for more than about 30 minutes until I was about 30 years of age, and people were coming through my door and taking me down for being part of a drug crime. So I drank from, like I said, 15 to 30. It was my coping strategy for everything. Things were good, let's have a cocktail. Things were terrible, let's go have a cocktail. So whether they were good, bad, or indifferent, it was like, look, let's go have a cocktail. At about 20 years of age, I figured out that I could sell a little weed here and there, and I could pay some bills with it. And what I'll share with everybody in this room is I was a pretty good customer service guy, right? And so you get a drug dealer who can show up on time and got a little better product than somebody else, and then all of a sudden, I was a popular guy. And I carried that charade on until I was about 30 years of age, and I was actually 29 years of age, and at that point, agents from the FBI and the DEA and everybody else in town kind of came in and kicked down my door and did a little interior decorating, and I ended up in the Salt Lake County Jail, and again, ended up being convicted of conspiracy to distribute and possession with intent. And so as a result, I got the sentence of 44 months and 17 days, which was back then every day on a 5-year sentence. So there was no, in fact, actually I remember sitting down with a counselor, and of course I was going to go to this parole hearing, right, and hopefully get a little bit less time, and he told me he didn't think that was going to happen. And you know something, that guy did me a favor, right? He did me a favor because he just let me know that this was the reality, you know, that, and one of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit today is that life isn't fair. You know, we're here, so what we get to deal with is we get to deal with the reality. And so one of the things, though, that before I ended up going to prison, I get the opportunity to go to a treatment program, right? I go to this treatment program, and I will share with everybody in this room here today that I did not go to that treatment program because I thought I was going to kick my alcohol and drug problem. I went to that treatment program so I could get out of going to jail, right? Or at least lessen that time. And what I'll share with everybody here is that it failed miserably. I got every day of that prison sentence, and I'll never forget that judge. His name was Jenkins, Bruce Jenkins, and he sat up there and he said, you know, Mr. Fisher, I'm going to make sure you do every day. And I'll give that guy credit. He is a man of his word. And so I did do every day. But you know, one of the things about going to treatment and what I'll share with you is that I loved it, right? As funny as that sounds, I loved going to treatment. I loved sitting in groups. I loved doing that group process. You know, I could look at somebody and I knew when they were lying and I knew when they were telling the truth. And the only reason I knew those things, you guys, is because I had told those same lies, right? I had not only told them to all of you, but I had told them to myself. And so the fact of the matter, I was in there and it was something that, man, I loved doing it. And if I could have stayed in treatment the whole time, it would have been awesome. But the thing that what I'll share with you about that is all the time that I was in prison and I was thinking about, you know, I was a kid, we had a construction business. And so, of course, that's what you think you're going to do when you get out, right? Is that you're going to get into some sort of construction piece. This is how I'm going to get a job. And the fact of the matter is, but I remember being there, and I remember loving that piece, and I would read things about treatment, and I would read things about psychology and sociology, and it became of interest to me. And so one of the things that what I'm going to share with everybody here today is one of the things that I think that happened for me that kept me out of a situation and kept me from going back was the fact that when I got out, and the truth of the matter was, you guys, I couldn't get a job. So I'd gone around, you know, I had a couple of friends of mine who said, oh, hey, Fish, when you get out, you know, don't worry about it, right? You know, we give you a job. And of course, the truth of the matter is I showed up at their doorstep and they were like, whoa, you know, you out? Yeah, I'm out. You know, I could use a job, right? And the truth of the matter is, you know, I don't blame them one iota, right? It was like the last thing they probably needed was any drama showing up at their doorstep. And so the fact of the matter is, and I remember going to this treatment center, there's a woman who'd been a counselor. And I said to her, I walked in, I'll never forget, and I said, hey, Linda, I said, and she goes, wow, how good to see you, you know, and it's all nice and all cordial. And I said, I need a job. And I said to her, I'll never forget this, you guys. I said to her, I said, I'm not telling you I want a job. I said, I'm telling you I need a job. And she looks at me and she said, well, why don't you make you the midnight to 8 guy here? And she gave me a job, and I'll tell you, you guys will laugh about this, but I was living in this halfway house, right? And I went back, and in the title of the job, even though I was the midnight to 8 guy and really just kind of the night clerk, the title of the job was associate counselor. So I went back to the treatment center, or I went back to the halfway house rather, and I sat down with those guys, you know, and of course you're sitting around, anybody get a job? No. Got around to me, and yeah, I did. Yeah, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to be a counselor. Right? And so it was like I had this moment of immense pride, you know. And so, but the truth of the matter was, and so that's the second piece I'm going to say to everybody here. You know, I think for me and for the rest of the guys I was in with, you know, we all get out and we want to go be the CEO of the next place we're going. You know, our ambition tanks are full, right? We've been held down here. It's like, hey, look, I want to go out and I want to I want to make an impact, right? And the fact of the matter is that what I needed to do is I just needed to get a job. But the fact of the matter is that getting a job at something I was passionate about and becoming the expert in my subject matter, right? So I worked with a lot of counselors. Tyler back here's got his master's in social work. I mean, I worked with a lot of guys. I was not the brightest bulb in the box, but I was the best studier. And one of the things that, that a prison allowed me was that I got to read. I had time to read. And so I would read these pieces and people would be talking about something that had to do with chemical dependency treatment. I could actually talk to you and I could talk intelligently. And I remember a couple of doctors saying, "Where'd you get that?" And I said, "Oh, it was in the Journal of American Medical Association," like I was some genius. I wasn't a genius, but I was a reader. And so the fact of the matter is I'm sitting there one morning and it's 8 o'clock in the morning. You've been up all night. Your hair's going off like Freddy Krueger, and Halloween. And this guy walks in, and his name was Tom Kaler. And Kaler was he was a guy in a suit. That's all I knew. In fact, at first I thought he might be a correctional officer coming in to see me. And he walks in and he said, "Who's Gary Fisher?" And I said, so I raised my hand, and he said, "Can we talk?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, so we walked into a little office and sat down, and Mr. Kaler looks at me and he says, he goes, "When people call here at night, what do you talk to them about?" And I said, "Excuse me, sir?" I said, "I'm not quite sure where this is going." And he said, "Well, when people admit to the treatment facility, we ask them how they heard about us. And an inordinate amount of people have used your name." And I said, "Oh." And I said, "Well, that's a good thing, right?" And he said, "Well, it can be." He said, "It just depends on what you're telling them." And I said, "Oh, sir," I said, "I talk about joy." And he said, "Joy?" And I said, "Yes, sir, joy." I said, "Because see, at the end of my drinking and using, there was no joy. It was just using to use, right? I mean, we're just trying to get through the next day. We're just trying to get rid of the pain." And I said, "But what I tell him on the phone is that I found a way. And I found that way through a 12-step program and through Alcoholics Anonymous and through going to treatment." And he looked at me, and I'll never forget this, you guys. He looks at me and he said, "What about the script?" And I said, "What script, sir?" And he said, "Well, we have an admission script." And I said, "Well, sir, I work the midnight to 8 shift, so I've never seen that admission script. But if you want me to read from the admission script, I am happy to do that." And he looks at me, and we talk for a little bit, and he gets up and he looks at me and he said, "Joy." And I said, "Yes, sir, joy." And so a couple days later, I get this call from this gravelly old charge nurse, and she says, literally she's a woman, and her voice was like this, right? And I go, "Gene." She goes, "Are you in trouble again?" I said, "Oh, why?" And she said, "Well, that Kaler guy's back here." And I said, "Well, I don't think so." And so, anyway, long story short, I walked in, and here was Mr. Kaler. And he said, "Do you want a job in our admissions department?" And I said, "Sure." I said, "I'd love that." And I said, "You want to give me the admission script?" And he said, "No, we're getting rid of that." He said, "We're just going to talk about joy here." And I said, "Okay." It was great. So, at any rate, so part is what I'm going to share with you is that first of all, the first lesson is just do something you love, right? So, I mean, look, I grew up pounding nails. I didn't like pounding nails. That was not something that held my attention. And so as a result, the first chance I got to go make a living selling a little dope, I did it, right? So the fact of the matter is find something, the old story, you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life, right? So first lesson, think about it here, you guys, because you got a little bit of time. What do I love? What do I love doing? And then as you're getting out, as you're matriculating out of here, what you want to think is, what do I need to do to get in that field? And, it's a funny piece. I was talking to a buddy of mine. He's a restaurant guy, right? A guy who was ended up doing time about the same time I did. And his first job was mopping floors in the restaurant, right? And I remember he told me, he said, all the people made fun of me. And he said, today I own that restaurant. And he does own that restaurant. But the part about it is because he was passionate about it. Like he wasn't going to let, and if you're passionate about it, that's not menial work. That's just work, right? That's just the way to get it. And again, become, get a job, get your foot in the door, because that becomes the piece. It's like nobody gets to start as the CEO. That's the part that I think that was, I don't know the word for it, but that was almost like delusional on my part. Right? I didn't want to take that. I didn't want to do that because I was going to have to do this, or I was going to have to do that. And the fact of the matter is what I needed to do when I left is I just needed to get a job. And thank God for this woman, Linda Steele, right? Because the truth of the matter is she didn't have any jobs to give. But she gave me a job being a midnight date piece. But I believe this, you guys. I believe that if we reach out, that people will reach back. So lesson number 3, I talked a little bit about it. I said, be an expert in your subject matter. So again, I don't know whether it's the restaurant business for you. I tell the story that, I had this young woman, Alex is her name, and she met with me the other day, and we were talking about, she basically sells behavioral health to, goes out and calls on therapists, and I said, tell me, Alex, I said, what separates your treatment center from anybody else's? And she gave me that kind of look, right? And I said, well, first of all, you need to know that, right? And I said, secondly, the fact of the matter is I said, when you're calling on somebody, I said, what are you calling on them? I said, you can call on them and say, hey, we'd love you to come visit. And secondly, you can send them a thank you note about, hey, thanks for coming to visit. But how else are you going to touch these people? Because there's an old adage, again, this is being an expert in your subject matter, you need to touch people 5 times. Touch people 5 times, they'll send you a referral. Don't know why 5 times is the number, never figured that out. They just told me it was 5 times, and what I'll tell you is it worked. But the truth of the matter is, as I was talking with her, she knew nothing about our business. Now, she's worked in our business for like 10 years. So I gave her a few marching orders and said, hey, but we're not going to get that opportunity as inmates, right? That's not the opportunity. We're not pretty blondes. So nobody's going to give us that opportunity. We need to be the expert in the subject matter out of the gate. Another story of a guy I did time with, a guy by the name of Steve Taylor. Stevie's a plumber. Stevie learned plumbing when he was in prison. And what I'll share with you guys is that he's a great plumber. He runs a little plumbing business, doesn't own it. But in his measure of success is that he could provide for his family and that he could give his boys a job in the business in which he worked. And let me tell you something, and the fact of the matter is now he kind of sits behind a desk, and I tease him about that, right? But the fact of the matter is sitting behind the desk because the other plumbers call him and they'll have some sort of situation that's perplexing to them, and he gets the opportunity to tell them about how to do it from behind the desk. And so, what he became, right? He became an expert in his subject matter. And so today he's got a lot of success. His kids all work at the business. And I know this, Christmas Eve one night, pipes are frozen, and the guy I called was Steve. And you want me to tell you the best part about this whole deal, you guys? Is I remember him walking out, and I said, what do I owe you? And he looked at me and he said, he said, Gary, I wouldn't charge my brother. I'm not going to charge you. And that was part of the loyalty that we bonded here with, right? We got that bond. Lesson number 4, be transparent. I won't tell you that I lead with my story that I was in prison, but I'm not ashamed of it, right? And so there'll be a time and a place. And what I remember, gentlemen, is if I told you about my history, I was bringing you into this inner circle, right? I was bringing you into, I was letting you in on the story. If somebody found out about my story, they'd go, oh, you know that Gary was in prison? And, and it was almost, and maybe I just never had gotten the chance to really tell them the story, and maybe there was never an opportunity. And I would oftentimes tell people, hey, it's not the story I lead with. And what I'll share with you is it didn't define me. But the fact of the matter is I never shied away from me doing my time. And one of the things that I will share with you guys here is that I was proud of my time. And not proud that I actually did what I did to get in prison, but when I showed up, I showed up as a man, right? I showed up, I stood up. I took my punishment, did my time, and so one of the things about it is, and today, you know, we talked a little bit about, I got the opportunity to run this treatment center up in Sundance, Utah. And I can't tell you how many times that somebody said, now, you were in prison? And I go, well, I'll take that as a compliment, right? They're just kind of looking at me. But the fact of the matter was I was proud of that. I was proud of the fact that, again, not the whole prison piece, but I had overcome all of those pieces that stand in your way. You know, that's the part. That's the truth. There are going to be those obstacles that stand in our way. That's the consequence of our actions, gentlemen. But the fact of the matter is they are overcomable. And how you know they're overcomable is I promise you this. I'm standing here in front of you, and my mother, unfortunately, would tell you that I was not the brightest bulb in the box and his kid going to school. So that's it. Again, lesson number 5, don't be ashamed of this time. You know, again, I'm not telling you to get out there and to kind of lead with this story, but the fact of the matter is I never had a hard time. And you know, one of the things I would tell people, and the officers probably need to hear this too, I said, prison was actually good for me, right? I mean, I learned to get up. I learned to go to bed. I learned to show up on time. You know, nobody was really interested in me showing up for the 4 o'clock count at 4:01. You know, that was like, you know, try not to have that story here, right? Well, trust me, the whole federal prison system. So as a result, I got some life skills. And, you know, the truth of the matter it wasn't like I was really all that recalcitrant. I just didn't care, right? You know, one thing about the prison system, they help you care. And so, you know, as a result, I'm pretty much on time. I showed up for here probably about an hour early, you know. My wife, she couldn't get to anything an hour early, and her life depended on it, right? So that's all, you know, you guys are getting the state version of my training, but I got the federal version of that training. Lesson number 6, life is not fair. You know, fairness is not an issue. You know, we are dealing with reality, right? And so the fact of the matter is that, you know, if we go out and we put expectations on others, there's an old saying that an expectation is just a resentment waiting to happen, right? So what I'm going to share with you guys, and I think one of the things that probably helped me as much as anything in my recovery, anything in me not having you know, having any sort of recidivism and ending up back, is the fact that, and I learned this early on, put the expectations on yourself. Do not put the expectations on others. Because again, we're just bound to be disappointed. For those of you guys who are in recovery at all, there's a portion of the big book that says that our serenity is inversely proportionate to the expectations that we have. And so the fact of the matter is again, expect of yourself, but do not go out. Do not go out of here and expect others to kind of show up because, like I said, oh yeah, I got a job for you, fish, you know? And at that point, you know, early on, I was mad, right? I was angry because this guy told me, right? I mean, all the lies I had told in my life, you know, and all of a sudden, here it was kind of coming back full force, and you know, but I didn't understand it at the time. Expect a lot of yourself. Don't expect anything of anybody else. Lesson number 7, and the last story I have for you guys today, is patience. You know, I think one of the pieces that I'll share with you guys is that, you know, we come out of here, or at least I came out of prison, and my ambition tank was full. And man, I was like this race car at the gate, right? And I wanted to go out, and I wanted to be successful, and I wanted to be successful today. And the truth of the matter is, you know, that's not how life works. You know, it took us a long time to kind of get into this situation in our life. It's going to take us a while to dig our way out, right? So patience is the key. I share this story with folks, and, you know, let's just say that me going to prison, you know, it was hard. You know, it's hard on our families, right? And in my family, my father had passed away, and my brother lived in a different state, and so the person who really got the brunt of of the whole news channel about me was my mother. And let's just say that our relationship was pretty estranged. And, kind of in an effort, again, to kind of make amends, right? And amends means to change, right? People were tired of hearing them say Gary Fisher was sorry, right? They don't want to hear that. They want to see change. And so what I started to do is I started to say to my mom, I said, Mom, would you like to go to lunch one day? And we would go to lunch on Thursdays, right? We'd go to lunch at about 1:30 because I could go home from the midnight to 8 job, get a few hours of sleep, and I could get up and I could go take her to lunch. And you have to think that I'm 7 years sober at this point, the story I'm about to tell you. 7 years. So the 44 months and 17 days in, and then another 3 years beyond that. And she agreed, and we would go to lunch, and we'd go to lunch every Thursday. And she liked to go to this place called Marie Callender's up in Salt Lake. And the truth of the matter is, guys, is Marie Callender's is terrible, right? But she loved it, right? And I'm like, okay. And so if that's where, and that was a difference, right? Because no longer did it have to be the world according to me. If that's where she wanted to do, if that's what somebody else wanted to do, I was no longer so selfish that I'd say, well, I don't really want to go there, Mom. Because this wasn't about me anymore. This was about her. And so I'd go up to her house, right? And she lived in a nice little neighborhood, probably the only crime that had ever been committed was me blowing up mailboxes back in the day, and so, but she was elderly, and she would lock the locks and chain the chains and bolt the bolts, and I walked up, 7 years sober, right? And I walk up, and her door's cracked open about this far. And I'm not sure what I thought was going to happen, but scared me. And I opened that door, and I go, Mom! And I hear her go, coming. And so she kind of comes she was the quintessential blue hair old lady, right? She kind of bops around the corner. And I said, Mom, you left the door open. And she looked at me, and it made me emotional telling you guys this story. She looked at me and she says, oh, I knew you'd be here. 7 years. It was my best day sober ever. So, what I will tell you guys is that, that's what awaits. There is success out there, But again, find something you love. Be an expert in your subject matter. Have patience. The fact of the matter is people in our situations are getting better every day and go out and lead long, full lives. And they have those moments. They have those moments where people can now again rely on us. So I'll share this last piece with you. This has nothing to do with the story. It was my very first AA meeting. I walked in, and this guy, his name was Chuck, never forget. And I can tell you, I did not want to be in an AA meeting probably any more than you guys all wanted to come and sit here and listen to me today. But Chuck comes in, and he sits there, and he gets up, and he got a 5-year chip. Never forget. And, being the impatient guy that I was, I wanted the 5-year chip today too, right? I thought that was, I have one of those chips anyway. We've got to wait 5 years. And but he got up, and he talked to me. He said, he said he was a grateful alcoholic. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, I am in the wrong place, right? How can this guy be grateful about this? But he talked about all the things that had come from those experiences and the experiences of being in recovery and the experiences that we all get here today. And what I'll share with you is at the very end of it, he said, he says, what I realize is that, all the speakers who come up, they come and they bring a gift. And he says, but oftentimes, he said, we just get up and we just leave that gift on the chair, right? We walk out and we don't take anything away from that meeting. And I'll never forget, first AA meeting ever, he looks at me, or not at me, but at the whole group, and he said, he says, what I'm going to implore you guys is don't leave the gift on the chair. Take it with you. Thanks for letting me share. Okay, my standing ovation, there we go. Thanks, you guys. Yeah. You know, and I will tell you guys over here, because these guys never hear this. These guys never hear this. I swear to God. This is a story. I'm probably out of prison a couple years. And I'd gotten married. And why she married me was just, we're still married today, so that just shows you that's the beauty of sobriety. Yeah, we should all clap for that, because she's a saint. But a guy who I had gone to school with had become a police officer, and he was involved in me getting arrested. And I had not seen him. I just heard that all kind of through the grapevine. And I'll never forget this, you guys. I'm running through Albertsons, right? Because my wife's coming home from this trip, and I'm trying to have a little food in the fridge so I don't look like a complete idiot, right? You know? And I come running around the aisle, and boom, chest to chest, run right into him. And he looks at me and he said, "Fish." And I said, we used to call him Burr. For those guys who remember Raymond Burr, if you're old enough in here, he had an old Ironside piece, but I go, "Hey." And before he could say anything, I said, "Thanks." And I said, "Because it saved my life." You know, my drug addiction was such that I would have, I probably just had months, if not weeks, And so grateful. Thanks.
This has been Conversations with Corrections from the Utah Department of Corrections. These podcasts are on our website at corrections.utah.gov or on the UDC YouTube page. Suggestions for a future topic can be sent to corrections@utah.gov. Thank you for joining us.